It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler. It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler.
Hey guys, Tyler here. A statue of Johnny Cash has been revealed at the Capitol. Before I give my own personal thoughts about this whole entire matter, I first want to state that my thoughts that are expressed in this video are not necessarily here for a popularity contest, because sometimes when someone says something out loud that somebody else doesn't like, that means that sometimes for the case of that person, the truth is actually being told, and more often than not there are cases when people have in fact told the truth, but many people got upset, and that person almost always end up being right. And so I don't necessarily expect anybody to like the thoughts that I'm going to express in this video, but hopefully time will tell if I'm actually right or not on this particular issue about the statue of Johnny Cash. That being said, the main speaker who actually revealed the statue of Johnny Cash is somebody that is known as Mike Johnson, and Mike Johnson is pretty much the House Speaker for the House of Representatives.
What a great crowd. To my colleagues in Congress, Governor Sanders, the Cash family, to the sculptor, Kevin Cressy, and all of our honored guests, it is my pleasure as Speaker of the House to welcome you all to the Capitol today in what is a truly remarkable occasion. Today we have the pleasure of recognizing, get this, the first musician to ever be honored with a statue here in the Capitol. And Johnny Cash is the perfect person to be honored in that way. He was a man who embodied the American spirit in a way that few could. He was an everyday man. He loved to fish, and he suffered the pain of loss. He was the son of Southern farmers and of the Great Depression. Americans related to Johnny Cash, so families across the country invited him into their homes through their radios and their record players. Because the man in black sung of tragedies of life and the difficulties that Americans faced, he provided Americans hope.
When it comes down to the history of Mike Johnson, there is something that's so incredibly concerning about this particular individual. And the main reason why I would say that is largely because time and time again, he has demonstrated that he does not want separation of church and state when he actually gets into power.
What's happened, Alex, over the last 60, 70 years is that our generation has been convinced that there's a separation of church and state, right? We heard that term all the time. And most people think that that's part of the Constitution, but it's not. Remember, I'm a constitutional lawyer.
I think it was the first day that you had been sworn in. It appeared that you were praying on the floor of Congress with a number of other congressmen. And there is a question about the separation of church and state. We often talk on this show about folks, about whether religion should play a role inside a company, whether people should be allowed to pray inside a company. It's one thing to pray outside and to have your faith, and there's a great importance in that. But how do you think about that, and how do you think about the public perception of that?
Listen, faith, our deep religious heritage and tradition, is a big part of what it means to be an American. When the founders set this system up, they wanted a vibrant expression of faith in the public square because they believed that a general moral consensus and virtue was necessary to maintain this grand experiment in self-governance that we created, a government of, by, and for the people. We don't have a king in charge. We don't have a middleman. So we've got to keep morality amongst us so that we have accountability. And so they wanted faith to be a big part of that. The separation of church and state is a misnomer. People misunderstand it. Of course, it comes from a phrase that was in a letter that Jefferson wrote. It's not in the Constitution. And what he was explaining is they did not want the government to encroach upon the church, not that they didn't want principles of faith to have influence on our public life. It was exactly the opposite.
As you guys can see directly from the video evidence, what I'm trying to insinuate is that there's actually intentionality on why exactly the statue of Johnny Cash is actually at the Capitol. And I think the main reason and the purpose on why the Johnny statue is actually there is because somebody like Mike Johnson openly has stated out loud that he thinks that there is no such thing as separation of church and state, and once you give somebody an inch, they would actually want a mile. Now, this whole entire statue is not necessarily, you can say, an isolated incident, because time and time and time again, there have been many Republicans and also politicians that have been trying to weaken the ideas, the notion of separation of church and state. Let's take, for example, back in the 1950s, the original model of the United States was actually e pluribus unum. However, because of the Red Scare, what happened was that they basically changed the model for "In God We Trust." We don't need to go that far away to actually know that there are politicians that continue to push this narrative that United States is actually a Christian nation. Let's take, for example, Ryan Walters. Now, more recently, Ryan Walters has done a video in support of putting the Bible directly in classrooms.
The first thing I want to talk about is a request that we're going to be making in this budget, and it will be a request for $3 million to provide Bibles to the Oklahoma classrooms. We have talked about ensuring that our history courses include the role the Bible played throughout American history. We've talked about the efforts of left-wing groups and the teachers' unions to drive the Bible out of school. I believe it's important for historical context for our kids to understand the role the Bible played. And so that $3 million ask is provided in the budget in front of you. That would be in conjunction with the $3 million that we're putting forth currently to provide Bibles in the classroom. So this would give us the ability to utilize $6 million in less than 2 years to ensure that the Bible hasn't been driven out of Oklahoma classrooms, and would be a significant step for the state of Oklahoma to ensure that we're not allowing the left to censor American history.
Another example of this is the fact that there are many public schools across the countries that are pushing for the ideas of chaplains. For the state of Louisiana, what they're doing is trying to put the Ten Commandments in every single school classroom. What have they done directly for the case in the state of Alabama? They cited the Bible on why exactly they're against the whole entire notion of IVF. I want to further emphasize that I'm not necessarily saying for my main argumentation that Johnny Cash was in fact a religious person. I am not saying that in the slightest. There's no shadow of a doubt that his life was actually really religious, and so I have nothing against that particular point. What I'm trying to say is that the statue of Johnny Cash is actually a product of the movement for Christian nationalism across this country, because time and time and time again, we've been presented with things that are not necessarily constitutional when it comes down to the issue about separation of church and state and the ideas of secularism, largely because time and time and time again, we allow people who don't necessarily care about these kind of values take powers, and time again, like I show my examples, we allow such people to continue to push the idea, the narrative of influencing laws using holy texts like the Bible, or denying people IVF because of the Bible, or allowing Ten Commandments because it was their God-given right to show the Ten Commandments in front of non-Christian students. And so I would say that the statue is actually a symptom of a growing movement that has been done directly by Christian nationalists to push this idea, this narrative, that we are in fact a Christian nation. And unfortunately for this case, the statue is a symptom of this growing culture that we see almost every other day at this point. But what do you guys think about my thoughts? Tell me in the comments section down below. I know that my thoughts are not necessarily, you can say, the most popular, but again, I am not here for a popularity contest. But until next time, take care.